Hi, and welcome to this video. My name is Darren, and this year, 2024, I'm learning Dutch. I want to start out by saying that it is not my intention to be a language YouTuber. I'm making these videos just to document this year and to document my process. If the content turns out to be useful for someone else, all the better. I also want to keep these videos short and informative, so let's get to it. In this video, I want to talk about my study routine for the first 3 months of the year, using a method called BDT and why I find it so effective. BDT is a method of beginning to learn a new language that was developed by a well-known Italian polyglot named Luca Lampariello. It is designed for those at an absolute beginner level and is meant to take you through the first 3 months of building a base in a new language. I won't go into detail about BDT because it is a proprietary method and Luca sells a course about it. It's not really my place to give it all away here. I will leave a link in the description to Luca's website, and you can go there to find out more information about the course. BDT stands for bidirectional translation, and it is generally a self-study course, meaning it doesn't require that you have a teacher. BDT is just one way of starting to learn a new language, but what I feel makes it so effective is that it's based on what Luca calls effective study principles, which involve acquiring skills in the language, not just rules and knowledge about the language. In order to work with BDT, one needs a resource that includes a lot of simple texts or dialogues that start at a very basic level and progressively introduce more complex structures and lots of new vocabulary. For my resource, I'm using a service called DutchPod 101, which is created by a company called Innovative Languages. Again, I will leave a link in the description. Within DutchPod 101, there are different pathways, and the pathways of Beginner 1, Beginner 2, and Intermediate have enough dialogues to get me through the first 3 months using BDT. I have access to the written dialogues, the audio, and something called lesson notes, which includes grammar notes and historical and cultural information. DutchPod 101 is a standalone Dutch learning resource, and for some it might be sufficient. However, I am not a disciplined student in some sense, and I have a hard time creating and sticking to structure. So for me, DutchPod 101 on its own is probably not going to cut it. So I am making use of all the provided dialogues, and BDT is providing the structure I need. I do occasionally refer to the lesson notes and review the grammar. I also do the assignments and different tests that appear along the way in these different pathways. So without going into detail here about the method and its principles, I can give you an overview of what it entails. Basically, BDT involves studying a short text or dialogue over the course of 6 days, where each day you are reviewing the text with a different skill, using a different part of your brain in order to internalize the vocabulary, the grammar structures, and pronunciation, etc. Luca calls these different approaches brain-friendly. And basically what happens is each day you start a new dialogue. And what it means is once you get going is every day you are reviewing 6 different dialogues and doing one of the 6 different steps on each of those dialogues. So for instance, today I did step 1 on lesson 50, step 2 on lesson 49, step 3 on lesson 48, step 4 on lesson 47, etc., etc. So it's a constantly evolving and rotating process. The consistency and predictability of this daily task is extraordinarily helpful to me. Otherwise, I might be off looking for something new to do each day in Dutch, like I did when I was studying Russian, and this kind of approach is totally chaotic. Here are a few other reasons, aside from the structure, that I feel BDT is so effective for me personally. If one were to make a list of important skills to learn in a new language, it might consist of reading, speaking, writing, understanding pronunciation and intonation, and even translating. Not surprisingly, BDT works on all of these different skills. Just about anyone will tell you that the foundation of effective learning is daily engagement with the material, and BDT is a daily activity. Also, it is through repetition that we improve in these various areas and these various skills, and BDT has repetition built in. But just as important as having a habitual daily practice is knowing what to study, and this might vary greatly depending on one's personal goals. Since my goal is to learn to speak as much Dutch as possible this year, I am focusing on natural spoken texts and dialogues and avoiding putting too much emphasis on studying grammar and other rules. The DPOD dialogues are very well written, and one gets repeated exposure to vocabulary, common phrases, and grammatical structures in different contexts throughout the lessons. This brings me to a point that for me has been vital in my recent language studies, and that is context. My recent experience is that learning new vocabulary, sentences, and sentence structure is far more effective for me when the material appears in the form of a short story or dialogue. I can give you one good example of how context makes a big difference for me. Duolingo is a popular language learning app, one I used when I first started studying Russian again. And it is great with repetition, but I feel it lacks the rich contextual element. One of the pro tips from Duolingo is to write down as many sentences as you can remember at the end of each lesson. This is a great idea, but it's something that I personally never did, and I imagine a lot of people don't really do. I found it actually quite difficult to remember the sentences from the lessons, which is probably just a memory deficiency on my part. But using the short dialogues, like in DutchPod 101, all I have to do is picture the scene, like, for instance, the guy in the airport whose baggage didn't arrive, and the words and phrases from that dialogue will almost magically start to appear in my consciousness. With context like this, you have a mental image that is an extremely powerful boost to memory. This to me is a far more holistic approach than looking at words or even whole sentences on flashcards. Even repeated exposure to new words and phrases through the use of flashcards is not enough for me because all those things are just kind of there in isolation. Words and phrases are just vehicles to transmit information. And I find, for me, that when those words and phrases are within the context of a larger message, a story, I have a much higher level of recall. So there's quite a bit of information there, and I could go on and on about it. But like I said, I wanted to keep these videos a bit short and to the point. So that's going to be it for today. I just wanted to give you a picture of what the first 3 months of language study using BDT looks like and how I feel it is a solid and effective method. Please feel free to post questions and comments and subscribe if you'd like to continue following along. Thank you for watching. Hartelijk dank voor het kijken. And see you in the next video. Tot in de volgende video.